Good evening. Welcome to Sing Spark number 6. Tonight I'm gonna give you some singing hints from your director. Some things I want you to know, some things about vowels, some things that every singer I think should be aware of. I want to say how wonderful it has been to have Robin Rockline, a fabulous singer and teacher, working on the mechanisms of singing with you. No book can make up for a real live voice teacher. You know, I have to tell you that I believe that one-on-one is invaluable and that each of you could benefit from further private lessons or master classes. That's just a little plug for Robin. She would be a great person to study with. For this session, you will need handouts number 12 through 18B. That's because the B was added after I had already turned in all of the handouts. That's important though. I want to share some information that you need to know. I will show you terms and markings that will help you understand the intentions of the composer as you work through your scores. I would like to discuss a little bit more about diction. From your text, diction is defined by the American Academy of Teachers of Singing as a combination of enunciation, articulation, and pronunciation. In group singing, diction must be uniform. Details such as vowels, consonants, diphthongs, attacks and releases must be the same throughout a chorus. When a chorus incorporates all of the above, great diction happens. That's our goal. Robert Shaw used to say, "The vowels give our singing beauty. The consonants give them drama." I'm going to continue. I'm going to start with enunciation. It is the manner of utterance as regards fullness and clearness. Enunciate clearly. Text matters. As Robin suggested in her previous class, know what you are singing. Write an English translation into your score if you're singing in Latin or any uncommon language. Color your voice to convey the meanings of the words. Bottom line, get your text across to the listener. Articulation is the second most important part of diction. Articulation is the action of speech organs in the formation of consonants, vowels, syllables, and words. It refers to the way each note begins or is started. There are multiple ways to articulate, but the most common are legato. Legato. It comes from the Italian word for tied together. This is indicated by the phrase mark, or the actual word legato may be found in your score. Notes are connected in an unbroken line. Staccato, or detached articulation, unless your conductor indicates otherwise, notes with the staccato dot above or below should be held for half the value of the note. Now I have to tell you a little story. When I was learning to play the piano, I remember in the old John Thompson books a song that taught you staccato. And I don't know what the name of it was, but they had a picture of an iron. It was like an iron. And you were playing the piano as if it was hot. Well, you need to know that if you touch something hot, you do a quick attack, because if you know it's hot, you're going to go like that, which makes the note accented. A staccato has nothing to do with the beginning of a note. Staccato has something to do with the release of the note. So you can play if that's half note, that's a staccatoed half note on that note. It has nothing to do with the attack. Poor John Thompson, he did a lot of things right, I suppose, because a lot of us studied it out of his scores, but that was not one of them. So staccato, as a general rule, makes you hold the note half the value. If it's a half note, you hold it for the value of a quarter note, and then the rest is a rest that's just added into the score for you. And it's indicated by this little dot. How easy is that? Staccatissimo is a word that most of us don't know so much, but issimo means more, and it's more staccato. you have this little arrowhead above or below, depending on the stem, indicates whether it's above or below. If the stem goes down, the markings are above. If the stem goes up, then the markings are below. Anyway, the little arrowhead indicates Staccatissimo, which means to sing it or play it as short as possible. So it is, and still not accented at the beginning of the note, but the release is very quick. The release is just about as fast as possible. Attenuto. And this is a confusing term, and it's used very often in singing. Attenuto is a note slightly detached from its neighbors, but held for its full value. Well, to me, that's a little confusing. This is what a tenuto looks like, and I ask for it often. But it is a note that needs its full value. It's not staccato. It's not totally detached. But a tenuto gets its full value, but there is space between the articulation from one note to the next. I was trying to think of an example, and I would say He Watching Over Israel by Mendelssohn that we sing from Elijah, where it goes, slumbers not nor sleeps. Not is not a half value. It's not a staccato. It's not a staccatissimo. It is what I would call a tenuto. Because it becomes slumber snot, number one. And we want slumbers not nor sleeps. So they're separated for word clarity, I would say, but they're not considered staccato. They get their full value. Accents. A sideways V. It starts with a big part of the V and makes it smaller. An accent suggests a very strong attack on a single note. It's an attack on a single note, and it happens in every instrumental or singing mechanism there is. Now, there are many other musical terms that dictate articulation, and I'm going to ask you to look at handout number 13. Number 13 is a list that I have gathered, some from the glossary of your text, and some that I just wanted to make sure were included. But I think all of these terms you need to study and look at. The first 5 on this list are the first 5, the most common that I have brought to your attention right here. There are a couple more that I should go over with you. Marcato is a term that you'll hear in choral singing. It says emphatic. It's usually slightly accented and slightly detached. So it's a combination of probably an accent and a tenuto. Marcato has the energy of the accent and the separation of a tenuto. Marcato. You'll see that word in your score, and you'll hear your director saying that. A sforzando, on your going down the list slightly, is the FZ or SFZ. SFZ. And that sforzando means a sudden burst of volume on that particular note. Now, a sforzando can be for a group of notes, whereas an accent is always only for one note. But a sforzando can symbolize for a group of notes as well as just for one note. So that's one you have to look at carefully. Somehow I listed legato again. We've already talked about legato, so forget it. Leggero is lightly. Leggero, when I think of leggero articulation, I think of Bach. When you play Bach, when you sing Bach, it's separated a little bit. It's a little light, more dance-like. It's like seeing a ballerina dance lightly. And you see some people that dance like I would, like an elephant. And so leggero is a light articulation. It's not staccato. It's not any of the above. But it does have a feeling of dance and a feeling of lightness. As you turn to the second page of this handout, the word Licht is the German form of that. Fuoco is with fire. So that, I would say, goes toward the Marcato kind of articulation. But these are words that describe the mood, the articulation that the composer is trying to get you to. Giocoso is playful. Agitato is agitated. Most of them are obvious. Cantabile is in a singing style. Cantabile is an adjective that you will see in your scores very often. because the melodic line needs to be beautifully sung, beautifully sung. And I say that goes right along with espressivo, which is the next one on your sheet. It means expressive, and that means to shape the words and shape the phrase beautifully in a singing method. Both of those should have to do with the singing style that you do. Maestoso is majestic, pesante is heavy, pomposo is pompous, sostenuto is sustained, portamento is sliding from one note to another. In choral singing, I would say, I can't think of but one place, and it's like in a spiritual where a portamento works. We don't slide from one note to another. Soloists do that often, and they can get away with it sometimes for dramatic effect. But in a choral setting, a portamento, don't learn the word and don't learn to do it, please. Tranquillo is tranquil. So if you can look at these words over and over, just to make sure you understand them, because you will see these as adjectives in your scores, and that should indicate your articulation or your feeling for that section of music until it's changed. Now I'm going to move to pronunciation. It's the utterance of words with regard to sound and accent. This is a big one. Let's talk a little bit about vowels. Vowels fundamentally carry the note and therefore the tune. The vowel sound carries the note and therefore the tune. Your vowels must be sustained in singing. The vowel is held as long as possible before you pronounce the consonant that it precedes. The vowel is held as long as possible. Vowels are the reason that choral directors like to sing in Latin. There are 5 vowels in Roman Latin, Church Latin, that we often sing in, and other sung Latin as well. 5 vowels. English requires 13 different vowel sounds. So we have options, which means it's more difficult to get a chorus to sing the same vowel sound. This is something I hope to work on more as your leader, and I hope you'll work on more as singers. Let's begin with pure vowels. In the formation of pure vowels, from beginning to end of the vowel, which we've just established is the longest part of a note, the pure vowel production in the face remains the same. The position of the tongue and the position of the lips, the space on the face, remain the same throughout the duration of the vowel. I am going to draw one thing here, the word Lord. Okay, we're looking at the word Lord, and let's say it's a whole note. The sound that I would ask you to sing is L-A-W, law, and then a D at the end. The ah is the vowel that we want to sustain as long as possible. For a whole note, I would ask you, if I could rewrite every note in the text, I would have you like a double dot on that. And that would be, like a 16th note value here. So it's Lord, Lord, Lord. The ah is the sound that sustains and carries the pitch for you. The pure vowel sounds, you keep that same sound. You might crescendo, you might diminish during that long note, during the long vowel, but you do not change the shape of your face during that time. I've written the pure vowels up here for you to look at, this first little section right here in English. If we can agree that the AH, the ah, the na, is the most open sound that you can make, the na, right here. The first group of vowels, sounds, are tongue vowels. Robin mentioned some tongue vowels the other day. And I want you to see them in order from closed to open. Ni, ne, ni, ne, na, na. These are tongue vowels, and they progressively get more open as you say these. I would love to see you take these words. You can change the the consonant at the beginning. But change these words and practice the movement of your tongue as you go through this process. As you open from closed to open vowels to this neutral vowel of na. And then this is the other end of this. You could write it like this. But anyway, this is the other end of it. And these are called lip vowels. Robin also mentioned lip vowels. You want to keep the same space in your face, which is open. You start here, and your lip, you keep the same space inside, but your lips, not your tongue, change the vowel sounds. Nut, not, nerd, no, nook, noo. You start rounding this sound with the outside of your face coming closer together into the oo sound. I think this is an individual thing that each of you can practice. It's on your handout number 12. All of this is on your handout number 12, and I challenge you to work on these. I think they would help our chorus tremendously. There is another vowel sound there. There are several more to talk about right now, but I want to talk about the schwa. The schwa is the most common vowel in the English language. It is the vowel in could, or the, mother, mother, together, together, together. It's about, about. It's not an sound down here, but it's about, a father, the second syllable. Every vowel given a high enough pitch modifies to the schwa. Now, every vowel sound, especially for sopranos and tenors, as you go into the stratosphere, you can modify the sound toward that common schwa sound. The schwa sound is easier to sing when you're way up high than some of the vowels that you are given in the text. It's called vowel modification, and it's a very common thing to do when you get into the high registers. Don't be afraid to do it. It will make the word will come out beautifully, and the vowel will be sung more beautifully. A schwa sound is notated by an upside down E, an upside down lower E. So it looks like this. It's a good thing to be able to put in your score. I can't draw very well. It should be almost part of a circle there. But it's an upside down, lowercase e is the schwa notation. So if someone tells you, make that vowel a schwa, and you stick that's easy to draw, stick that on top of the end of that word, and use that vowel. It's very helpful for you. I want to get on into diphthongs. Diphthongs, now I have to tell you something. One of the readings I did said, make sure you know how to pronounce diphthongs. I've always pronounced diphthongs correctly, but I have not always spelled diphthongs correctly. Diphthongs, D-I-P-H-T-H-O-N-G-S. I left that H out right there. I did get it back, I think, in some of your, in my text here. I might have misspelled it throughout because in my whole life, that's how I've spelled it. But I was incorrect. But it is pronounced dip with a P. That PH sounds like a P, and thongs. So make sure you get that correct. The word comes from a Greek word. It literally means having two sounds. More specifically, it deals with two vowel sounds next to each other in one syllable. I'll say that again. A diphthong has two sounds, two vowel sounds next to each other in one syllable. A diphthong begins as one vowel and then moves to the other vowel within that syllable. Well, that's troublesome in singing in a chorus because the truth is we all need to move from the first vowel sound into the second vowel sound as a unit, or if you have vowels that do not match, it causes pitch problems. It makes the chorus sound out of tune. So we need to be very specific about where we move from one vowel sound to the next. These are called compound vowels or diphthongs. What you must know is you need to hold the first vowel as long as possible. You extend the first vowel as long as possible on the length of the note value, making the second one very short. Now, this is on your handout as well, but I'd like to go through some of these. These are diphthongs that you will come into with different words. I'm going to take the word day. The A sound, A, day, day, or day, day. I almost like an EH there instead of an AY. Some will show one way or the other. But the point is to hold this one, and this is very short, almost as short as a final consonant would be. Day, day. Night. This is a I, night. The E comes right before the T. Night. If half the chorus goes night, night, it ruins the blend. It ruins the intonation of a chorus. Oh, no, no, no. That ooh is almost unheard. No, no. You. I think this is a hard, I should have found a better example. You. It goes to that ooh as well. You don't want to close into that ooh sound too early. Now. 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 My mother used to call me Nancy. She made diphthongs out of the A, which is not even, the lowercase a, it's not even a diphthong. She could do that though. Boy, boy, boy. Do you hear those? These are difficult to just naturally do without a thought process. Diphthongs count, and we must be careful about those. Now I'm going to move over to consonants, staying on this pronunciation a little longer than anything else because I think it's that important. Consonants must be pronounced louder than vowels to be heard, especially when you're singing with an orchestra. The timbre of all the instruments together kind of can cover up the sound of our consonants. And if we're trying to make our text clear to the audience or the listeners, we need to make sure that our consonants are a little louder than just normally sung so that they can be heard. There are a few consonants that are sustained in singing. They are called vocal or voiced consonants. Vocal consonants or voiced consonants. These can be exaggerated at the discretion of your director. And they are usually helpful in helping listeners to hear them. What I'm going to tell you about voiced consonants is I think they make some languages beautiful. The British English uses a lot of voiced consonants in their motets, and they're lovely sometimes. They have acoustics that help that sound, and it can be a lovely thing used. If it's overdone, it can be on the edge of tacky, I think. But it is certainly something to know how to sing. You need to consider two things when you sing voiced consonants. Z is one, L, love, mother, no, ing, singing, R, ring, very, word, this. All of those can be on a pitch. Now, there are two things about these voiced consonants that you need to know. One is that because they take longer to articulate in time, you have to do these ahead of the beat. You always want your vowel sound, love, love. If I'm conducting and I want love on the downbeat, 1, 2, 3, 4, love. The L started before that downbeat actually happened. And the L has to sneak in ahead of time. So you have to breathe earlier and be prepared for a voiced consonant, even if you're not overdoing that vocal pitched consonant. The other thing is the pitch. On a voiced consonant, you want the consonant note to be the same note as the following vowel. Now, if you don't do that, you end up with a scoop. Okay, this is the note on love. Love. If you start the L on that note, hear that? Love, love. Some pop singers will do that. It's fine in pop singing. It's not fine in classical or traditional. And classical, I don't mean in the snobby way. I mean in just, I would say, traditional singing. You don't want scoops in choral singing, because if some scoop and some don't, we have another problem. So think about this. Love. It can give an accent. There might be a time you're told to do something like that. It would be very unusual, but it can happen. Instead, you want the consonant L on the same note, that same F note that the vowel of love is going to be sung on. Love, love, love. You hear how it causes a scoop up. So when you have, when your director fusses at you about scooping around, oftentimes it's because you're starting the consonant on a different pitch than the vowel sound. Yes, a little ahead of the beat, but yes, the same pitch is the vowel for these. Okay. I think I've told you all of that. When singing a legato or a smooth line, intensify vocal consonants to match the volume of the vowels around them. Maintain constant breath pressure. When you're trying to sing legato line, which means a smooth line, which means one word ends as the other word begins, and the whole thing is connected, you have to intensify vocal consonants to match the volume, not only the pitch, but the volume of the vowels around them. Otherwise, the volume goes from here, then there's a consonant, and then here, and there's a consonant. So you need to maintain constant breath support to keep that line smooth. The next are called sub-vowel consonants. I'm not going to talk as long about all of these, but sub-vowel consonants feel like they are produced under the larynx or under the voice. They cannot be sung on a pitch. B, body, d, do, g, go, j, jump. Do you see these? B, b, b. You can't really give a pitch. Body, you know. It's just sub-vocal. Aspirates, these are kind of tricky ones. When and heart. I want to tell you about aspirates because they begin with a puff of air, not with when, not with a vowel oo, when. You know, you don't want to add a vowel to that sound, but you do want when, which also takes a little time to happen. H of heart is another aspirate, but H can also be silent, like in the word hour, H-O-U-R, hour. When the H sound is voiced, it takes a little extra time. When it's silent, like an honor or hour, it can be right on the beat. What else do I have to go to? Explosives. This is the one that I say comes from your diaphragm, from your belly. A good exercise for this is p-t-k. Both of these are the K sound, cart, kick, p-t, and Q. Q is included, but not in my little fun exercise that you can walk around. P-t-k. You should be able to feel your diaphragm moving. They're explosives. What you need to know about explosives is that they require an explosion of air to create. And explosives fall right with the vowel. Pow, po, poo. They're not ahead of the beat. They're just kind of with the vowel, right dab on the beat. So if you're going to work on articulation and separation, those help because they're right on the beat. There's no wiggle room for those. You will do those naturally on the beat. Sibilance, I say it backwards every time, sibilance, are sung on an airstream. Think about center, center, church, father, sister, show, thought, extra. You see that these are on the airstream, but they're not pitched. Enough about these. All of this is on your handout number 12. I encourage you to study this. If you know what you're singing and you know which kind of consonant you're dealing with and which kind of vowel you're dealing with, you'll be a step ahead of half the chorus. Go for it. There is one more consonant I want to talk about. And it's a rather, I don't want to say controversial, but it's one that has many options. The consonant R in English. It has its own category, sort of. It can be produced in 3 different ways: voiced, flipped, or rolled. Always sing R when it begins a word. River. Always sing R if it is between 2 vowels. Arise, arise. Never sing R when it ends a word. River, river, river. That's where the schwa can come in and be that unaccented vowel that just ends that unaccented syllable of the word. But never river. Never sing R if it precedes another consonant. Earth, earth, earth. You really don't need that R in there at all. Earth. You never, if it precedes another consonant. Never sing R if it comes prior to a silent vowel, like the word here. Here, here. You hear that? It became a voiced R, and it just closes everything in. So never sing R in those 3 instances. The third way an R can be articulated is to flip the R. You flip the R when there's a double R, like the word sorrow, 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 sorrow. Instead of sorrow. When you're singing that, that can just become ugly. Sorrow, sorrow. Flip the R on a very high pitch if the flipped R is easier than a voiced R. I won't embarrass myself doing that for you, but if you sing a very high R in the stratosphere, flip it to get into the vowel quickly instead of trying to voice it, which, as we know, takes a little extra time. Flip the R when you're seeking a dramatic effect, like the word grief, grief. You often, when singing the word grief, want to color that word in some way, and by flipping that R, it gives it a little more bite, and I think that that works. Flip the R if you're singing opera. Flip the R if it's a required consonant in a foreign language, but in the English language, that's the only time. And here's the rule: never roll an R. I guess it could happen for a dramatic effect. It's a really ugly sound, and you'll find singers that think they're being really fancy by rolling that R over and over. It's just not appropriate. So I hope you'll understand these things about R. I have I think a choir member made a sign that said, "Leave your R at the door when you come in," because there are very few times that you need it, and this is specific. I'm going to move on to breathing in a chorus. Choral phrases and lines are often longer than the breathing capacity of most of us. Composers and conductors cause this to happen. My John used to always push on me because he would blame me for phrasing like a pianist and not like a singer who has to take a breath somewhere. Well, in my opinion, a phrase is a phrase, whether you're singing or playing an instrument. The phrase is the phrase. A chorus, I'm sorry, Mr. John, but a chorus has many options to get through a musical phrase, no matter how long it is. They can stagger their breathing. They can, anyway, I'm going to give you some ideas on how you can fix breathing a long line. Because to sing beyond your breath support is not good either. You can't produce your best sound. So I'm sorry, Mr. John, but I think there is a way. I'm not sure you like to take a breath in the middle, but whatever. Your text often indicates possible and probable breath marks within a phrase with punctuation. But a quick breath can be taken in the middle of a phrase as long as the line or the direction of the phrase is not broken. If you're in the middle of a phrase, a quick breath can happen, probably at a punctuation mark, and the phrase can go on to the peak of the phrase. But your director has the last word on that and should give you instruction on that so you know what to do. Your text says simply breathe when you have to, and if possible, where it will do the least harm to the phrase. Coordinate with your neighbor. Silently, I might add. Please don't talk in rehearsals. But you can point in a long phrase when your neighbor obviously can hear that you're out of breath and need a break, and say here and put a check. And then they can mark that their neighbor is doing it here and that they should do in some other spot if they need to, or be sure to carry it. Do not breathe on long notes, as they should be creating direction, either crescendoing the dynamic level through a crescendo or diminishing. Long notes do not just sit here. The vowel stays in your face, but the vowel can be crescendoing or diminishing, and should be. The longer the note, the more direction it needs to have, either going up or going down, but not stagnant ever. So if you take a breath during a long note, you're breaking that direction even more than you are if you steal a breath during a short note. You can steal time from a note or leave out a short note. That's the advantage of being in a chorus. I've told soloists in some of these melismatic passages to take a note out instead of killing the rhythm of the phrase. And I still think that's okay, even for a soloist. If you sneak a breath in the middle of a word or phrase, enter softly so that the break in sound is not noticeable to the listener. Your text also reminds you that if you run out of a breath before finishing a word that ends in a consonant, do not pronounce the consonant. If the word is God, and I'm out of breath, duh, happens later, don't put it on 3/4 of the way through the long note, but just leave it off. You can move your mouth when the rest of the chorus sings the D, but I probably would tell you not to even sing it. But make certain that you don't put your D on because God, and then there's still more singing of the vowel before the final consonant. So you have to be wise when making these decisions. Almost everything we've discussed in our classes so far have been mechanics or the theory of music. With the thought of breathing through phrases, I think it would help if we had a greater understanding of what a musical phrase really is. I always say think of a phrase as a musical sentence. It is a group of notes that feel like they make sense and belong together. When we speak, we do not even realize it, but we raise and lower pitch as we develop sentences. What did I just do? As we develop sentences, da da da, da da da. That pitch goes down at the end of a sentence. You also take a little lift at the end of a sentence, even if you don't take a breath. We can say multiple sentences without a breath. In music, you generally are supposed to take a breath at the end of a phrase. But in the English language, whether you take a breath or not, there is space there. We don't even realize that we're doing that, but we do that naturally. It's part of our language. A couple of general rules about musical phrases. Phrases are marked in scores through the use of slurs, curved lines that cover the entire sentence or phrase. I made up this line. These notes make no sense. but do you see it's 4 measures? And that big curved line can go above, or it can be a smiley face going under, depending on its location on the staff. But that is a musical phrase. That is the symbol that you'll see. It is a slur, a very large slur. Believe it or not, musical phrases most often are made up of 4 measures. When I was told that, I didn't believe it. I knew more than my teachers, I thought. Every composer is not going to make musical phrases 4 measures. But the truth is, probably 80 to 90% of phrases are 4 measures, or multiples of 4. I think it's the symmetry that our brain likes. You know, we have 2 eyes and 2 hands and 2 ears and 2 nostrils and 2 feet. And something about the human body accepts symmetry more easily. So I do think, in looking at phrasing as an old lady now, I believe my teachers knew a whole lot more than I did at the time. Now, I will say, it's not a law. It's not like part of the theory that has to be like 4 beats in a measure. It's not the grammatical rule, but it certainly is most often that way. Often phrases are balanced with equal number of measures in sections. If a phrase is 8 measures long, there's probably 16 measures in that little section. It's amazing if you start counting sections in music, how related they are to the 4-measure phrase. Now, there are composers that bring interest and variety to their compositions by varying the length of phrases. But still often, it's in a multiple of 2 or 4. A lot of music has, say, the question and answer kind of thing, of a 4-measure phrase of a question, 4-measure phrase of an answer, and the first 4 measures are in 1 phrase, and then the second part is in 2 plus 2 measures. So you still end up with the 8 measures, but it's 2 plus 2 plus 4, or 4 plus 2 plus 2. But you hardly ever find 4 plus 3 plus 1. It's just, I'm not saying it cannot happen, but it's just not very common. As a singer, and I think I've mentioned this, you should plan to breathe at the end of each phrase, not during it, if possible. As a general rule, the final note of a phrase most often ends on the same dynamic level as the first note of the phrase. Every phrase has direction and a peak. Know where you're headed. There are phrases that start soft and crescendo to the peak of the phrase. But probably, I'm not going to give you a number because I don't know. But most phrases within the phrase marking here, within this 4 measures, will go to a downbeat, a high note. It's usually at least at the middle of the phrase or later, because it builds to this point with a feeling of line, often a crescendo, and then diminishes back to where it started. Another thing to be careful of as singers is that when you take a breath at the end of a phrase and re-enter for the next phrase, you have a full body of air and you're ready to go. Be careful not to overextend the dynamic just because you have a full body of air. Begin the next phrase or the next word where you left off here, because the next phrase then has its own direction. I was going to show you something. Let's see if I can show it to you right here. This is from Haydn's creation. We've sung this several times. A new created world springs up at God's command. It's funny because this is an illustration in your text. There's a comma after this word. These are the measures, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the end of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? You see that you have 3 beats here and 1 beat here? Remember that rule? Okay? You see that there's not a comma here? Well, your book gave 2 illustrations of articulation. And this is where your conductor has to make decisions and has to let you know, talking about phrasing. Your book, if you follow the blue phrase, did 4 measures here, and did 4 measures here. A new created world springs up at God's command. That's acceptable, I would say. I find it odd that there's not a comma here, and yet they're telling you to take a breath with that phrase marking there. The other one that your book showed was the black line. A new created world, that's a 2-measure phrase. A new created world, which is a repeated phrase with a lift there at the end of that black line. Springs up is almost like a little motive there, like a two-note slur. Springs up at God's command. So they've got 2 plus 2 plus, well, I guess that would be a 1 and a 3. I don't know. That didn't make any sense to me. So I could be wrong, but the way I had you sing this was a new created world, take a lift here after 2. A new created world springs up. Because to me, there's no comma there, and we're trying to say more than this. I don't want them exactly the same. So I was the red person. A new created world, breathe. A new created world springs up, repeat, you've got a comma, springs up at God's command. So that was the way I chose it. Now what I have to tell you is, just because I chose it doesn't make it right, but it also doesn't make it wrong. So there are many options, and I think that's what makes different recordings, different music, individual. Now the bad news is if you disagree with your director, your job is to follow him anyway. Sorry about that. I'm going to go on with slurs now. The same curved lines have some other but somewhat related uses. And I want you to see, where did I do this? Right up here. Have other uses. Slurs, this is the huge idea of the phrase marking. A 2-note slur. These indicate that 2 notes should be sung with no break between them. It becomes a strong beat and a weak beat. You sing legato under the slur mark. You sing legato under the phrase mark unless it's indicated, something different. But you sing certainly or play legato on a 2-note slur. It generally becomes strong, weak. It works real well with a 2-syllable word that's accented on the first syllable. Say the word father. Father, father. You don't want father, father, even on the different notes. Father, you want father. It's a place for a schwa probably. And this gives you a little bit of a lift at the end of that little slur as well. Father. This may not interest you, but my poor piano teacher, when he tried to teach me how to play 2-note slurs, he kept saying, you go down on that note and you go up on that note. I said, I don't go up on that note. My finger has to go down to push that note down. It made no sense to me. But a slur is one hand motion on a piano, on a keyboard. Or it's one breath on a wind instrument. Da-dum. They would never break that. On a stringed instrument, they would play that on one bow. Da-dum. And the second one would be weaker. Strong, weak. The next is a tie. It's the same kind of small curved line. A tie. I always think these are hard to talk about, but they're really not hard. A tie is 2 notes of the same pitch that are joined by the curved line. The second note is not resounded, but continued, creating a new note length. The length of the 2 notes are added together. These often are used when the composer wants the note to extend over a bar line. So, if this was a half note, and this is a dotted half note, 2 beats, 3 beats, that's a total of 5 beats that you would hold that one pitch without re-striking that. I think we've talked a little bit about ties. Everyone should know about a tie. But you see, we're still using that idea of the slur. The last place that a slur is used is in your text. A single syllable on multiple notes. Okay, if you're singing the word mother and the composer has 3 notes he wants on that first syllable, mother, mother, then he can put the slur line over these 3 notes with the M-O under it, and you are to sing that vowel through those 3 notes. That tells you that it's not 2 notes on ma and 2 notes on the, but it's 3 notes on the first syllable and the 1 note on the last. So all of those are talking about slurs. Now I'd like to move forward into terms and markings that every choral singer should know. I have divided these into categories for better understanding, I hope. I'm going to ask you to go to handout number 14. Number 14 is dynamic markings. As you can see, dynamics indicate how loud or soft the music should be. In this handout, I have markings starting with the loudest. Fortissimo, which is a triple forte. We call it that because fortissimo is not so easy for me to say. Maybe you can, but it's extremely loud. Then it goes fortissimo, forte, mezzo forte. We're down to medium loud. Then mezzo piano, piano, pianissimo, pianissimo. The other dynamic markings that are on this chart for you are crescendo, growing louder, diminuendo, growing softer, decrescendo, growing softer. A crescendo, I think most of you already know this, but a crescendo is getting, the symbol for that, I can't draw beautifully, is getting larger, so it's getting louder. A diminuendo or decrescendo starts here and gets softer. It's pretty obvious. A forte piano is loud, followed immediately by soft. So you can see this, it could go F, P. So it may start loud, and the next note would be soft, or the next section would be soft. One more term on this page that I want you to look at is what we call hairpins. And let's see if I can draw a little better here. It's getting larger here and smaller here. You'll see me or your director do this. And what that means is you're getting larger, then you're getting smaller. A hairpin can cover a single note or a long note to give it some direction in both ways, or it can be for an entire phrase. Your director could say, make a hairpin out of that second phrase right there. And it would go halfway through and shape crescendo and diminuendo. Know the term hairpin. I'm going to move you to handout number 15. These are speed markings. At the beginning of each movement, you will find a lot of information. You'll find a clef sign, a key signature, a time signature. You'll find metronome markings or mood markings, and you need to know what they mean. Some of the most common Italian speed indicators are listed on this sheet. I have gathered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that basically means slow. Largo means slow. Adagio means slow. Lento means slow. My phone means slow. That meant I was slow and didn't turn it off. I'm sorry. It's okay. In the middle of this page, you find andante, which I think of as a walking tempo. Moderato and allegretto. All of these are moderate speeds. And at the bottom of the page, you find the faster tempos. Allegro, vivace, presto. If you see any one of those 3, you better be ready to move. That's what happens there. These are not exact tempos like a metronome marking. Remember, when we first talked about rhythm, we talked about metronomes and how they could say specifically this quarter note equals this speed. But these give you a general idea. If you see at the top of the page, right above the first treble clef, or the first bit of your grand staff, if you see largo, this is a slow piece. If you see vivace, you need to know that it's a quicker tempo. It's just that simple. Turning on. That's enough about that. You can read. Handout number 16, Tempo Modifiers. This is an important one. These are Italian words used in conjunction with other terms for sudden or gradual changes in pulse. Rallentando, ritenuto, ritardando. RALL, the abbreviation is in your handout. It means gradually slower. Ritenuto is a marked reduction in tempo. Ritardando, RIT period, is a gradual slowing. All of those will be in the score and indicate to you, number one, to slow down, and if you're a choral singer, number two, to watch the conductor, so that we can all slow down at the same speed, generally at the same rate of speed. Rubato is another thing. I think this is an interesting term and an interesting concept. Your book describes it as elasticity of tempo. I say it's push and pull within a segment of music. Now I'm going to make up an example. Let's say we're going to say that this is our 4-measure phrase. We're going to say that we're in 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's make this a half note here. So we've got four beats in every measure, a 4/4 time. We're going to say that the quarter note equals 60, which, as you recall, meant 1 second. So if I was going to have rubato within this 4-measure phrase, what I could do is push the tempo here to here. And then I could pull back the tempo here to there. If you were playing this and keeping strict tempo, and 60 is 1 a second, there would be 16 seconds between these 4 measures. If you do a rubato, you push this part faster, you pull this part slower, but if you measured the time between those 4 bars, it should basically equal 16 seconds. It's a push and pull, but it's not a total change of the tempo. It's a push and pull within the realm of the tempo. Rubato. A tempo, following a ritardando, means to return to the original speed. A tempo just means in tempo. Allargando is a broadening, a little slower, and a little louder. You know, I read that and I thought, I think of allargando as a little slower, but I've never thought about it as being louder. So let's correct that in my brain and yours. Accelerando, gradually faster. You sit on the accelerator in a car, don't you go faster? You push that accelerator down, you'll move. Allargando is another one. Slowing and increasing in volume. Allargando always meant slow to me, slower, but I don't think I ever knew that it increased in volume at the same time. Morendo is dying away. Calando is lower in volume and slower in tempo. I think of both of these terms as fading away into nothingness. Fading away dynamically and in tempo. I'm going to turn over to handout number 17, musical terms. Oh my, here we go. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I want to make sure you read these at home and know them. There are certain ones that you really must know. A cappella. I hope every singer knows that that means the unaccompanied voice. Ad libitum. At will. You know, we did some Duraflay, and I remember seeing that in the score, thinking, I don't want my tenors to sing ad libitum. I want my tenors to sing the notes that Mr. Duraflay wrote on there. But apparently, he gave freedom in his direction on that. I didn't, but he did. Don't listen to the man that wrote it, listen to your director. That's not true. The next one is the 8VA, an octave higher if it's above the notes, or an octave lower. It generally looks like a little thing like this with dotted lines over the staff. I could do it up here. Well, maybe I can't reach it. But it would like 8VA, an octave, and it had these little dots, you know, like that. And that means to go up an octave and play these notes up an octave. Easier to read. If it happens to be under the staff with the little dotted lines, 8VA, then it means to go down an octave and play an octave lower. That's something you should know. It's helpful. Anima, with spirit, appassionato. intense with passion. Misterioso, mysteriously. Attacca. This is important because it means to begin the next section at once. A lot of times in oratorio, you'll go in the Kyrie, say, from Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, to Lord have mercy. They're different musically, often A, B, A, but it will say attacca, meaning going straight from this into that and then back, because that is really one piece of the Mass. But it is almost always in 3 sections. Coda is an enhanced end of a piece. A coda means like the piece could have ended like sermons do sometimes. They could have ended, but then they go on to give you a little bit more bite. And so that's what a coda is. I'll show you in a minute what a coda sign looks like. It's on the next page. Sempre means always. If it says sempre staccato, that means always staccato. Sempre means always. Simile is another Italian word that means similarly. I think you see that in keyboard music when they mark a pattern with a pedal marking, and then they'll say pedal in a similar fashion. And so simile means to continue with that pedal pattern as you go through the piece. It can mean the same as singing, and as long as you're doing it the same way. Maggiore means major. Maggiore means major. Minore is minor. Here's a good one. Mezza voce, half voice. Lacrimosa, in lacrimosa, where you go bum, 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 bum. I would say that's half voice, or sotto voce, with subdued sound, off the voice. Just bum, bum. Not singing with all the breath support that you might need. Segue into the next section would mean go into the next section immediately. Segue is a term. Tempo primo means to resume the earlier tempo. A trill. Here's some ornament things. A trill is a rapid alliteration of a note, not alliteration, a rapid alternation of a note with its upper neighbor. Assume that the upper neighbor is in the indicated key signature. Your director may tell you how many shakes to put within that trill. Singing trills in choral music is difficult. It can be done. I remember the Bach B minor Mass that we never got to sing last spring had a trill for the sopranos. And I hadn't gotten to the point that I told you how many shakes were in that note. But there was a trill for sopranos for the whole section. And it has to be done in coordination, or you end up with that against that, against that, against that. Not so nice. Tutti means the word tutti means all. Often in your scores, the soloist will sing a section and then it'll say tutti. That means all sing. That means all of the chorus sing at that point. Know that. Unison singing is when all singers are performing on the same melody. I'm going to move on. Number 18, Italian modifiers, some symbols and abbreviations. These Italian words modify the main terms. I must tell you, I've put like F for French or G for German and maybe a couple E for Englishes. Everything I'm talking about on these handout terms are Italian. There are a few French terms, there are a few German terms, there are a few English terms, and there are probably more terms than that in the glossary, but mostly what you see in our scores are Italian terms. Anyway, you need to know that. These words modify the main terms, like meno means less. Meno allegro. That means less fast. Remember, allegro was fast. Meno allegro. Molto means more, much. Allegro molto would be fast, more fast. So that's what that word does. It alters it and makes it, it's just an adjective to give more definition to it. Più is more also. Più allegro, more allegro. You'll see that somewhere in the score. It almost means an accelerando. So there are multiple terms that can cause the same thing. Poco is a little. Poco retenuto, a little bit slower, a little bit slower. not completely so. Poco a poco is little by little retard. Poco a poco. You'll see these in your scores. Subito means suddenly. Subito piano. In the Foray Cantique, there was a place that you had a crescendo to forte, and then it said subito piano. And then you went straight from forte to piano on the next note. It happens in a lot of pieces. It's very dramatic. Sempre means always. Brio means with vigor. There are more. Con, C-O-N, means with. Dolce is sweet. Dolce, you'll see, to sing sweetly. You'll see that often. Meno is less, molto is more. Mosso, M-O-S-S-O, is more motion or movement. Non or nicht in German means not. So study these and know that when you see these in your score, you need to understand that they are adjectives that are changing the main word. I'm going to go to the last handout, which is called 18b. And oh my, it's a good review for you. I'm not going to talk about all of these because this is almost like a review of a whole lot of what we've been through. And these are the symbols and the abbreviations that you should know pretty much already. I did pull some out of this page that I wanted to make sure that I had covered before I stopped this talk tonight. This is called a fermata or a grand pause. Some people call it a bird's eye. That's what it looks like, but it means to hold greater than the length of the note on the page. I must tell you something. When music goes to this point of a fermata or a grand pause, generally speaking, you need to know that there is a slowdown that happens prior to this note, prior to this symbol. So the measure or two prior to this, you need to look up so that you can do your retard at the same time headed to this grand pause. Rarely does a grand pause just happen out of a clear, steady, absolute tempo. It generally is preceded by some slowdown. Know that. Dal segno, I can't draw this, but it looks like a funky looking S to me. Dal segno is a return to the sign, and then you repeat. You repeat until it tells you to stop. If it doesn't tell you to stop, you go to the end again. But generally, you repeat till you get to the word fine, which means finish. That means the end. So if you see DS, al fine, that means go back to the sign, which will be somewhere in the previous section of music. Go back to the sign, repeat till you get to what is the end. We talked about a coda. Often you'll see a coda sign. Sometimes it'll tell you to jump to the coda. You'll have a coda sign to a coda sign. You match them and jump from this place to the next. But this is a coda sign, a circle with a cross. A coda is the fancy ending. This tells you return to the original tempo, as if it's going back to the primo tempo. That's what that symbol means. If you see that in your score, there again, think of the Kyrie. It's an easy one to think about because it's always almost in ABA form. If the first section, that the Lord have mercy, is in one tempo, and the Christ have mercy is in another, and it's going to go back to the original tempo of the Lord have mercy for the third section, you will often see this little sign, which means to go back to the tempo that you started the first Lord have mercy. Da capo, I believe capo means head. So this means DC or da capo, go back not to the sign, but go back to the beginning, the head of the piece, and go till you see the word fine or finish, or go to the end, I suppose. These are probably boring to you because you should know this, but this is what I call dots facing dots. It can go for 5 pages if it wants to before the dots face the dots. But if you have dots facing dots, that means to repeat what's between those dots. If you see a thick double bar at the end, that means the end of a movement or the end of the piece. If you see rather thin but double bar lines right there, that means the end of a section. That means the end of a section, not the end of a piece or a movement. That's the end of the movement. If you see first and second endings, you can have 3 endings. You can have 4 endings. But you come up to the first ending, and then you've got dots. If you don't have dots facing anything, you go back to the beginning. If dots end up facing dots, and you go back what's between those dots, but the second time you jump over the first ending and take the second ending, which is generally the cadence or the end, or the second ending can take you into a whole new section of the music. But that's first and second endings. You need to know how to follow that. This is something you see sometimes. I try to avoid buying music for choral singers that only has your part. But there are some pieces that you can only purchase that way. I think when we bought the Duraflé Requiem, your scores only had vocal parts in it, which meant that you would see something like this, that the orchestra was playing 10 measures before you sang. I think it's a terrible thing to use those kind of scores, because you can't get your pitch from anything when you just have 10 measures. You have to almost learn it with that by ear instead of by looking at the notes or what the orchestra's playing for an interlude or an introduction. Anyway, it does happen, and what this means is instead of writing 10 bars out of this bar, this measure, this measure, this measure, and wasting a half a page of score, they just tell you that this is 10 bars a measure that you're not singing. So that's what that whatever number is there is the combined bars of rest. The last thing I want to talk to you about is something that I may have learned incorrectly as a child, or maybe my teacher taught me incorrectly. I think we've all used the word appoggiatura over and over in music, and with the idea, like with trills, that appoggiaturas can either be this way or fast. But this appoggiatura is two notes, a little tiny note that really has no note value in counting the pulses in the measure. It has no value in a measure. If it's an appoggiatura, it has a tiny little note, and then this is the main note. In a real appoggiatura, the main note is divided in half. In this case, it's a half note, so I'm dividing it into 2 equal quarters. And this would be played or sung as 2 equal quarters. Bach uses this a lot. In the St. Matthew's Passion, I remember we did a lot of what we call appoggiaturas. There is something else that you need to know about, and it's a cecchiatura, a ceccatura, a ceccatura. It's not a term I know. Maybe all of you do. I hope you're smarter than I am. But it's not a term that I really know. But what this is, it's basically written the same way, except that this is called, this little grace note has a line in it. I think I put it the wrong way. It should go that way. A single line crossing the flag. So it should look like the little note, and then you cross it that way. And then here's your main note, say. A ceccatura with a slash in the grace note means that the first note is really fast as you can play it. And for little kids, when I teach them on the piano, if they can't do, you can teach them to play it together and lift the first note. It almost sounds, doesn't it? That's doing it correctly. That's lifting the first note. But a ceccatura is a new word for me, and so I close this lecture with that. I hope you've learned some terms. I hope you will find these in your scores. I want to tell you that there's a wonderful glossary at the back of your text, and it's alphabetized, so you can easily find a word that you don't know. But I tried to go through that and take the main words and categorize them for you so that you understand what you're looking at instead of just trying to memorize a glossary. You need to know these terms. They're important. Our next session is with Robin Rockline again, and so I look forward to that. She will be working on warm-ups and who knows what else. Have a great week.